So today we will discuss about the roadmap, so the current status of the document and the upcoming changes to the rules for both short-term and long-term. So first of all, what were the motivations for starting on a new basis for the roadmap? Well, mainly we had four objectives. One was to make the link between the scientific challenges of the league and the roadmap more explicit. Then this was also to make sure that the rules evolve along with robot capabilities in order to avoid creating new rules or applying modification to the size of the field which would not match the current status of the robots, but still allowing teams to plan the development of their robots on the long term and to schedule what they want to work on in order to be prepared for the RoboCup in the long term. But also to create a more maintainable document. So here is a quick element which will quickly make you understand why it's important to have a maintainable document. The current status of the roadmap was the first version was presented or at least sent to both the league and the trustees on June 13th, 2019. And while it has been presented to the trustees, there were no major complaints, but no formal answer. So we cannot say that the roadmap is validated by the trustees or approved quite clearly. And for the league, well, we have released it. We have considered it as accepted because there was not negative feedback, but it has not been formally approved by the league either. The document is still quite long, and for the future, we would prefer to vote on modifications of the document, like we do for the rulebook, rather than to vote on a long document and to restart from scratch, because it's a long process, which is quite time consuming. So now the structure of the new roadmap is we start by the scientific challenges. So mainly describing the scientific context of the league and as well the research contribution from the league. So it's one part which takes a lot of time as well to write. So this part should be reworked every 4 years because the scientific challenges evolve, because maybe we have new research breakthrough, and this will also be the occasion to include the publications from the teams in the league to the scientific challenges in order to describe what was done by the league and what was the league contribution to research. We then have the section of short term with upcoming changes, where we should have the changes planned for the next 5 years. So this is something which should not change quickly in order to allow for all teams to have a little bit of sight of what is happening next. And then finally, we have the long-term event-triggered roadmap, which mainly includes what are the remaining steps to win against humans. So this last part is composed of metrics. So how will we measure the improvements of the league, the performance of the different robots, and what kind of criteria we need to meet in order to take significant steps for changing the league. So we will go more in depth in the 2 seconds part, so the short term and long term during this presentation. I think the scientific challenges, everyone here is quite aware of that. So what was implemented for RoboCup 2020, which we were not able to have this year and which is planned for 2021? So first, we had major structural changes to the league. So now teen-size teams are expected to play either in KidSize or AdultSize. So we have only 2 leagues, but we are also introducing Division A and B. So this year we were expecting to have Division A and B in KidSize, not in AdultSize, because there were not enough teams, and also the combined teams. So the idea, I don't know if all of you caught that, but the idea behind the combined teams was when some of the teams were not able to have enough robots to have a full team, then the possibility was to merge them in order to make sure that all the teams playing in the tournament have enough robots to have 4 versus 4 games in KidSize and 2 versus 2 games in AdultSize. Then we also introduced the autonomous placement for all robots. So this means that the striker and the goalie would have to enter from outside the field. And the humanoid research demonstration, where we had already some teams registering to show some of their exciting research work. And we had also 2 changes in the technical challenges. So for Kid, the push recovery challenge was transformed into the blindfolded robot challenge, where one of the robots had to guide another robot in order for the blinded robot to score a goal. And the high jump challenge, which was changed to parkour challenge, where one robot has to climb on a surface and then get back on the ground as quickly as possible. So we had some changes which were initially planned for 2020 but cancelled. So for the humanoid open competition, we did not manage to agree on an implementation plan early enough to have it in 2020. Moreover, it would have been difficult with the number of fields planned. So that's still something which is being discussed for next year. And we will have a session on the humanoid open competition on Sunday. 2 changes which were planned in the roadmap, which are the kick from moving ball, where it was planned that the pass would need to be performed by a robot. So focusing on the robot interaction in the technical challenges. And for adults, we were expecting to move from the push recovery challenge to standing up challenge. And those 2 modifications were voted out by the league. And so this brings us to the questions that we should discuss a little bit now, is how do we manage the upcoming changes? So should we mandatorily have a league vote before adding something in the short-term upcoming changes? And can we revote on something that has been announced? Because this is always a little bit painful for the teams who have spent time to prepare on some of the changes which were announced, and then they are removed because we do not agree anymore. So maybe we will take some inputs if someone wants to talk about this. Okay, so we have some changes, like Maike just said, which are planned for 2021. So the first one is being more explicit on network requirements. So this would mean like specifying a Wi-Fi quality with a minimal bandwidth, which should be available anywhere on the field. So this was something which was voted by the league, which is quite important for teams who are starting to have more collaboration between the robots and they are relying on the network. And as well, since we have more complex rules, even just listening to the game controller is quite important. But also some changes to enforce the rules more strictly, like monitoring the bandwidths of each team, because when one of the team is using all the bandwidths of the field, then this has a major impact on the other team. And currently, we have not really tools were used to detect this kind of situation. And the other problem is robots were not in play, should not be able to send messages. So we always have the risk of people complaining because they think that one of the robots from the other team broadcasted a message while it was being serviced. And it might be possible. It might be possible that it is by mistake as well, because the people who implemented the network stuff on the robot did forget to handle a specific case. And I think that this should not be like something which has impact on if the team is cheating or not, but more something which is not possible to do, except if you're really willing to mess with the network configuration. So the default should be that robots should not be able to send message if they are not in play. And no, that was something that was voted for 2021, but there's 3 points which need to be discussed. So the first one is, since RoboCup could not take place this year due to the coronavirus, should we postpone this change to 2022? That's wrong on the slide. This is something which would require significant development. So if we have any volunteer for RoboCup Federation project next year, this would be really nice. And it is also something where if we vote this, we risk to implement a rule which cannot be applied. And that's always a problem when we tend to vote rules and people are making development choice based on them, and then we cannot apply them. Okay, so now we can discuss a little bit about these 3 points. Okay, now we will get again with a discussion pretty soon, which is the problem of the height limits. So the height limit for KidSize was set to 1 meter, and that's the minimal height for AdultSize as well in current rulebook. But this decision was taken by TC only of setting the minimal height. And some teams from AdultSize have expressed a deep concern that lowering the minimal height is taking a step back with respect to the scientific challenges. While for some teams of KidSize, having 40 centimeters and 1.2 meters height robots in the same league is something which is quite risky. So that's something which needs to be reconsidered and discussed with the league. And since this rule has a major impact on both leagues, there's a question of how can we come on an agreement about that? Because since there's more teams in kid than in adult, if all the teams get the same voting power, then it's unfair for our AdultSize teams. So I think that's something we should discuss now and see what are the opinions of the different teams and people outside from the TC on this matter, and how do you think that we could vote on this in order to have something which seems fair for everyone? We are still having a major update which is planned for 2023, because that's something that most of the teams agreed that they wanted to have rules more stable in order to allow time to catch up with rule changes. So initially, the next major update of rules was planned for 2023, but here as well, we have the question of, should we postpone it to 2024? Because we still did not have the 2020 event, and we will not see the effect of the major changes we have since 2019. We will only see them in 2021, which will not leave a lot of time to adjust. So postponing it to 2024 might be an option. And still the content is not discussed yet. So is there major rule changes that you would like to see? So maybe discussing on those two questions at the same time. Okay, so the main idea behind the event-triggered roadmap is to measure the performance of the robots. So for example, measure the performance regarding motions, like the peak speed when walking or running, maybe soon. How much time is required to approach the ball? So like, what is their performance during games, which might change from just peak speed to time taken to reach a satisfying kicking position. And also some properties like at which distance robots are able to kick, what is the accuracy in their kick, which is quite important, for example, for the size of the goals or different elements like that. Also some measure of the perception. So this will be strongly correlated with people using a common protocol. And if people use a common protocol and we have some ground truth about the games with external cameras, then we can imagine, for example, measuring how often the ball localization is approximately correct, what is the expected error for the robots, same for self-localization, opponent recognition, or as we heard sooner this morning, recognition of the pose of the other robot, what actions are doing the other robots. So all of these metrics can be used to decide what rules we will change, but as well to show all the progress which have been made in the league and to track it along the years. We also have some other metrics such as based on the gameplay, so shots on goal, diving saves. So that's something that was already there, robots diving to save the goal in 2003, 2005, I think. And no, we don't have it that much either. So maybe it's because the rules are not providing a great incentive for diving. Maybe it's because the robots are not robust enough or something like this, but it's still something quite important. The number of robots on the field, which is something quite important if we want to increase the number of robots per team. We already have to be sure that enough teams have a satisfying number of robots. And one of the measure which was proposed by Jackie, which is a don't mess up period, which would relate to the time during which a robot can work autonomously, so without any pickup from a human, without any external intervention, which is something quite important if we want to decide that we should have less actions from the handler. Then we have to be sure that robots are autonomous enough to play during a large amount of time. And so the requirements for all of these metrics would be to be able to compare the ground truth, so with the labeled video, and the robot's prediction based on the common protocol. So this would also mean that in order to extract properly this kind of metrics, we would need some work from the community as well. Then A quick note about the criteria and rule implementation. So something which is a guiding principle is that we should not base rule changes on individual success, but rather on shared success. So this means that when we present a criteria to introduce a new rule, at least 3 teams need to meet the criteria provided in order to consider that a step is completed. And when a step is completed, the associated change is triggered 2 years later, which would allow some time to plan for both participants to the league and as well to LOC, because, for example, if it requires to have larger fields, we cannot just say for next year we have fields which are twice as big and we want to keep the same number. So that's some notes you have to keep in mind for everything that is coming now. So first change which can happen is the field dimension and number of robots. So what the TC thought is that it makes a lot of sense to have these changes happening at the same time. So this would mean, like, for example, here, what we have is currently we have in adults 14 by 9 meters field with true robots. So once they are fast enough and kick far enough, then we will go to 21 meters by 14 fields with 1 additional robot. And for the number of robots, we decided to have some steps with 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, 11, because it seems like adding 1 robot every time is like a step which will be costly to the team, but does not change strongly the games. And that's a little bit the same idea each time for the size of the field. Each time we kind of double the surface, not exactly for all the cases, but that's the idea. And the idea is as well that changing the size of the field is something which takes a lot of work for the teams and to find some place where they can train or anything like this. And so that's something which should be significant changes when it happens. And so the true criteria are written here. So first, robots should be able to cross the whole field in 20 seconds. So this will be based on the peak speed they can have during games. And the kick distance should be at least half of the field. So between the ball, before the ball stops rolling. So then it comes with a discussion, like for increasing the size of the field and increasing the number of players also makes it more difficult to practice. So at one point, we should get outdoor in order to be able to have some fields where we can play the games and practice and everything. But should we have some gradual steps? This is not written in the roadmap yet. So should we start by having an outdoor field with a roof before doing anything else? Should we move from artificial turf to real grass? Is it necessary? One of the elements we had from Michal, who's a referee in FIFA, was that anyway, in human soccer, they are moving to artificial turf rather than using real grass because real grass is too expensive. So for example, this doesn't seem that necessary. And when and how can we implement it? Should we include some technical challenges before to make sure that teams are ready for it? Or do you have any thoughts about this? Because this is kind of something we don't want to hear about, but we will need to hear about this at some point. Okay, so next element we have planned to make evolve is the element related to handlers and the duration of the game. So here we have 2 different stuff for adults. first we need to remove the presence of handler near the robots. But as long as we do not have robots who are capable of falling and standing up autonomously, it seems quite risky to remove the handlers in matter of gameplay and of damaging the robots. So the idea was to start by having technical challenges on standing up and falling for robots. And then something which can already be applied for KidSize is once robots are working for a time long enough without pickup or service, without requiring a human intervention, then we can make the incentive to robustness and autonomy even stronger by having harsher penalties for pickup and service. I think that it's something that they already have in SPL. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong about this. But when you are picking up run robots repeatedly, then the penalty gets higher, if I'm right. Okay, and then that should also be something which can be important to increase the duration of a health time, because if robots are not capable of playing for 5 minutes in a row, for example, there's no point in having half times which are longer than 10 or 15 minutes. I mean, we want to see robots playing autonomously during the full half time. So that's one of the point which was taken, with rules evolving, going each time increasing gradually. So we have not something which is linear, as you can see, but more proportional to current duration of the half time, because going from 10 minutes to 15 is already a big step. Going from 10 to 20 will really be very difficult for the robots and the battery. Then we have some gameplay rules which are still missing. So for example, throw-in, currently it's only an option to perform it with the hands. So one of the options would be to consider that for making throw-in mandatory, we will need to have teams able to do the throw-in in less than 10 seconds to ensure that it's not something very lengthy during the games, which would make the game not appealing at all. And also to have the ball cross at least a quarter of the field length before stopping, to ensure that it's something which can as well be used during the games. And then we have also the offside rules, which would require at least to have a significant number of robots, because otherwise using the offside rules has no sense. And as well, we need to be sure that the robots are capable of localizing properly, because otherwise we have a high risk of penalizing robots every 2 seconds because they think they are at an appropriate location, but they are not.